Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today. We
Mm.
are going to be tackling career change, something I think a lot of us think about at some point in our lives, and it can be exciting but also pretty scary at the same time. So luckily for us, we have Grace Lordan's book, Think Big, to help guide us a bit. This book is full of insights from behavioral science, and it's really designed to kind of equip us with the tools that we need to reach our ambitious career goals. So get ready to kind of swap out that feeling of being overwhelmed for some serious career clarity. And hopefully at the end of this, we'll all feel a bit more empowered.
Yeah, I think it's really refreshing how Lorden ditches that whole quick fix mentality.
Mm.
Instead of promising these overnight transformations, she offers this very realistic framework for sustainable change, encouraging us to think big, but also to act strategically. And a key part of that strategy is understanding the power of personal narratives.
You know, when I got to that section about Lordan's encounter with Professor Negativity, it really resonated with me because it got me thinking about how often we tell ourselves that we're not good at something or that we're not cut out for a certain path. And all of these stories, these narratives, they can really end up shaping our choices, sometimes without us even realizing it.
Absolutely. These narratives often stem from, childhood
Yeah.
or early career experiences, and they can sometimes become these self-fulfilling prophecies, kind of like the story of Ranch, who was convinced that he just lacked the organizational skills to go back to university. And this belief, this limiting narrative, really prevented him from pursuing something that he was passionate about.
Right. Ranch's story is such a good illustration of how these internal stories can hold us back from achieving our goals. So how do we begin to even identify these narratives and then even dismantle them, especially when they've been with us for so long?
Well, Lorden offers a really practical approach to this, which is just to dedicate some time for self-reflection. Ask yourself, what stories am I telling myself? And are they based on facts or are they based on outdated perceptions? And are they actually serving me or are they limiting my potential?
That reminds me of this idea I heard recently about reframing "I'm not good at this" to "I'm not good at this yet." It kind of shifts your perspective from a fixed mindset to one of growth and possibility.
That's a fantastic point
Mm.
because it really is about recognizing that we're not static beings. We have the capacity to learn and grow and evolve.
So once we start to challenge these limiting narratives, how do we actually set ourselves up for success when it comes to making a career change?
One of Lorden's key recommendations
Hmm.
is what she calls adopting a medium-term approach. So instead of seeking instant gratification, she suggests aiming for a time frame of about 2 to 7 years. I know it might sound like a long time, but it's about creating the sustainable change through consistent action.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I bet a lot of our listeners are probably craving those manageable steps. I think it can feel less overwhelming to think about it as not this drastic overnight shift,
Right.
but more of those small, consistent efforts that compound over time.
Precisely. It's like building a house. You don't try to erect the entire structure in one day. You lay one brick at a time, and eventually you have this solid foundation.
And Lordan provides some really compelling examples of this in the book. Like she shares the story of Katie, who built her own successful marketing consultancy in just 2 years. And remember Rianch from before. Well, after confronting his limiting narrative, he became a practicing psychotherapist within 7 years.
Those stories showcase exactly what we're talking about, the power of patience and perseverance, understanding that career transformation is a journey, not a sprint, and that there are going to be obstacles and detours along the way. But with that clear vision and that consistent effort, you can reach those goals.
So let's say someone listening is feeling super inspired right now. They're ready to get started. Where should they even begin?
Well, I think Lorden suggests a really good place to start is by focusing on what she calls ME+, which essentially represents your ideal future self. It encompasses those skills and experiences and even the career path that aligns with your aspirations. And she provides some practical exercises in the book to help people actually define their own ME+.
So it's almost like creating a roadmap, but instead of physical locations, it's mapping out those desired skills and experiences.
Exactly. And the beauty of this is it encourages you to think big, but without feeling overwhelmed. Because you're not trying to figure out every single detail right away. You're just focusing on identifying those key elements of your ME+.
Right, breaking it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
Absolutely. And that brings us to continuous learning. Lorden emphasizes that this isn't always about these expensive degrees or formal certifications, but it's about actively seeking out those opportunities to learn and grow, whether that's through online courses or workshops, or even just dedicating, 30 minutes every Tuesday evening to reading industry publications related to your ME+.
I love that idea. dedicating a specific time slot, making it more likely that you'll actually stick with it.
It's all about making it a consistent part of your routine,
Yeah.
just like brushing your teeth or going for a run. And you know what? I think most of us are already engaged in some form of continuous learning, even if we don't necessarily realize it. Whether we're taking an online course or attending a conference, or even just having these really thought-provoking conversations with colleagues, we are constantly expanding our knowledge and our skill set.
That's true. But what Lorden is really encouraging us to do is to be more intentional and more strategic about it, aligning our learning with our long-term goals.
Exactly. And that kind of brings us to another crucial element of Lordan's framework, recognizing and mitigating cognitive biases, which are those mental shortcuts our brains take. That can sometimes lead us to make decisions that aren't always in our best interests.
Yeah, we've all fallen victim to the planning fallacy before. That tendency to underestimate how long something will take.
Oh, absolutely. The planning fallacy is a classic example. But there are many other biases that can also influence our career decisions, like anchoring or the ambiguity effect or loss aversion. Lordan highlights how these biases can really subtly sabotage our progress if we're not aware of them.
And what really stood out to me was Lauren's anecdote about the spotlight effect. That tendency we have to overestimate how much other people are noticing our mistakes. It's kind of reassuring to know that we're not constantly under a microscope, and it encourages us to actually take risks without the fear of judgment.
That's a really good point. And she actually offers some actionable tips for mitigating these biases. So, for example, to combat the planning fallacy, she suggests scaling up your time estimates for tasks by 1.5. And then to address anchoring, she recommends researching market rates for salaries and consulting fees, so you're not undervaluing yourself.
These are such practical and valuable tips. It's really about becoming aware of those mental traps and then developing strategies to avoid them. But it's not just about our own biases, right?
You're absolutely right. Lordan also dives into the biases of others and how those external perceptions, even if they're unfair, can significantly impact our career progress.
It's a good reminder that we don't operate in a vacuum and that our career trajectories are often influenced by factors outside of our control. Things like unconscious bias based on gender or race or background.
Exactly. And Lordan provides some compelling research to really illustrate this point. Like, she cites studies about these CV experiments, where identical resumes, the only thing that was changed on them was the name, to suggest different genders or ethnicities, receive vastly different responses from employers.
That's pretty disheartening to hear. It really highlights how pervasive unconscious bias can be. Lordan also discusses this concept of statistical discrimination, where individuals are judged based on perceived group characteristics rather than their individual merits.
It's like they're being pigeonholed into a category based on assumptions, rather than being seen for who they truly are and what they can bring to the table.
Like in that example that Lauren gives about Julie, who returns to work after just 2 months of maternity leave. And this might lead to assumptions about her commitment to her career, even though she's completely dedicated to her job.
Right. And Julie's experience is, unfortunately, a very common scenario for a lot of women. And it highlights the importance of understanding those signals that are valued in different fields and then proactively working to acquire them.
Like learning the unspoken language of a particular industry so that you can mitigate the impact of unconscious bias.
Exactly. And Lordan encourages us to really do our research and identify those specific signals that are valued in your desired field, whether it's attending certain conferences or publishing articles, or actively networking in specific circles. It's about being proactive and strategic in shaping those perceptions.
But even with all this meticulous planning and preparation, we are bound to encounter some setbacks along the way. And that's where the importance of resilience comes in. Lordan dedicates an entire chapter to this essential skill.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that resilience is not just about dealing with major tragedies or catastrophic events, but it's about navigating those everyday punches, those rejections, criticisms, unexpected detours that are just an inevitable part of pursuing any goal, especially a career change.
Lordan breaks down these everyday punches into 3 categories: things that just happen, things that you can bounce back from in a day, and things that really throw you off, which is a helpful way to categorize challenges and then develop coping mechanisms for each one.
Right. And the good news is that resilience is a skill that can be cultivated and strengthened over time. And Lordan offers these really practical techniques, like giving people second chances, understanding the impact of loss aversion, and utilizing what's called the timeout technique to refocus after setbacks.
Yeah, I want to dig into the timeout technique a little bit more. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. The timeout technique is about recognizing when your emotions are maybe running a little bit high after a setback and intentionally stepping away from the situation to engage in activities that help you kind of regain perspective and recharge. It's about hitting the pause button and giving yourself the space to process those emotions without letting them derail your progress.
It's like giving yourself a mini vacation from the problem, just a chance to kind of clear your head and come back with fresh eyes.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be this long break. Even just 15 minutes of meditation or a walk in nature or listening to your favorite music can make a world of difference.
And you know, Lordan's personal anecdote about feeling emotionally drained after leaving home for her PhD really resonated with me because it's a reminder that even those seemingly small events can be emotionally challenging. And having those coping mechanisms in place is really crucial.
Absolutely. And remember that building resilience isn't about denying our emotions or pretending that everything's fine. It's about developing the mental and emotional tools to acknowledge those feelings, process them effectively, and ultimately bounce back from challenges stronger than before.
So we've covered a lot of ground here in this first part of our deep dive. We've explored the power of personal narratives, the importance of that medium-term approach, the value of continuous learning, and the impact of cognitive biases, both our own and those of others. And then we've even touched upon the importance of developing resilience to navigate those inevitable setbacks. What are some key takeaways you want our listeners to hold on to as we continue this journey through Think Big?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is that successful career change isn't about luck or circumstance, but it's about taking intentional action and developing that self-awareness. Lordan provides this really practical, evidence-based framework to navigate this process, reminding us that it's a journey, not a race. It's about taking those small steps towards our ME+ mark and embracing that continuous learning to hone our skills.
And even though we haven't specifically talked about it, I think seeking feedback is a crucial part of this whole process. And Lordan encourages us to actively solicit feedback from trusted sources to identify those blind spots and those areas where we can really grow.
Right. And she advocates for what she calls the three-person rule. If you hear the same piece of negative feedback from 3 different sources, it's probably worth paying attention to. But if it's just one person's opinion, it might not be an accurate reflection of your abilities.
So it's about developing that thick skin, but also being discerning and filtering out the noise and focusing on the feedback that can genuinely help you grow.
And then when those rejections or setbacks inevitably come, and they will, just remember the importance of resilience. Allow yourself to feel those emotions, but don't let them define you or derail your progress. Lean on those coping mechanisms that Lordan provides, like giving people second chances, understanding how loss aversion can really skew your perspective, and remembering that timeout technique to regain your balance and clarity.
That's such a good reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the negativity and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think it's time to move on to the next part of our deep dive, where we can delve into some even more powerful strategies for actually achieving those career aspirations.
All right, so we've laid some groundwork. We've talked about self-awareness and narratives and resilience, but I'm guessing our listeners are ready to hear more about actually navigating the workplace itself. Because let's face it, it's not always a level playing field out there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Lordan doesn't shy away from those more kind of complex aspects of career development. In fact, she dedicates a lot of the book to exploring themes like power dynamics and organizational structures and how those systems can perpetuate biases and create obstacles, especially for those from underrepresented groups.
Yeah, one concept she brings up is the tall poppy syndrome, where high achievers, often women in particular, find themselves targeted for criticism or attempts to undermine their success. It's almost like this strange paradox where standing out can actually work against you.
It's a fascinating phenomenon, and it really speaks to some of those deeply ingrained societal norms and expectations that we're battling against. Lordan also sheds light on how something as seemingly harmless as, informational cascades in meetings can actually contribute to groupthink, where dissenting voices are silenced and potentially innovative ideas get dismissed just because everyone's kind of going along with the dominant opinion.
Right, it's like that saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. But in sort of a negative way, if you're not vocal enough, your ideas might just get lost in the shuffle. So how do we navigate those really tricky situations?
Well, Lordan offers some really practical strategies for kind of pushing back against those dynamics. One suggestion is to always come prepared with data and evidence to support your ideas. Instead of just voicing an opinion, back it up with facts and figures.
So it's about shifting from, I think this is a good idea, to here's the data that shows why this is a good idea.
Exactly. And another strategy is to identify those influential allies within your organization and strategically align yourself with them. These allies can help amplify your voice and vouch for your ideas and kind of help you navigate those power dynamics more effectively.
Right, like building a coalition of support,
Mhm.
finding those individuals who believe in you and your potential and are willing to really champion your cause.
Precisely. And when it comes to providing feedback, Lordan suggests requesting it in written form whenever possible,
Hmm.
because this can allow for a more diverse range of perspectives and reduce the risk of that groupthink or those dominant voices drowning out others.
I love that tip. It's about recognizing that power dynamics exist in pretty much every organization and that we need to develop the skills to navigate them effectively. But as Lauren points out, it's not just enough to climb the ladder ourselves. As we gain influence and move into those leadership positions, we have this responsibility to advocate for greater equity and inclusion.
Such an important point. It's about using our power and influence to challenge the systems that perpetuate those biases and create barriers for others. It's about paying it forward and creating a more level playing field for everyone.
Right. Lorden is urging us to be both ambitious and socially conscious, recognizing that true success is about making a positive impact on the world around us.
Exactly. And, one of the most powerful ways to do that is to find meaning in our work. Lorden really emphasizes the importance of aligning our career aspirations with a sense of purpose.
It's thinking beyond just earning a paycheck and considering how our skills and passions can contribute to something bigger than ourselves.
Right. Asking ourselves, how can I use my talents to make a difference in my community?
Yeah.
How can I contribute to the advancement of knowledge or the creation of something beautiful or innovative? How can my work leave a positive mark on the world? Those are some big questions, but I think they're worth pondering.
When we tap into that sense of purpose, I think work becomes more than just a job. It becomes this calling, a source of fulfillment and joy.
Absolutely. And that sense of purpose can be an incredible motivator, especially when we face those inevitable challenges and setbacks. It gives us a reason to keep going, even when things get tough.
So Lorden's book isn't just about achieving that kind of outward career success, but it's about creating this more meaningful and fulfilling work life. And one thing that really struck me about her approach is this emphasis on kindness.
You know, in a world that often feels very hyper-competitive
Hmm.
and individualistic, Lordan's message of kindness is so refreshing. She reminds us that we're all on this journey together, each facing our own unique set of challenges and triumphs.
Right, she encourages us to be supportive and compassionate, recognizing that everyone deserves a chance to thrive. It's about creating this more collaborative and inclusive environment where we're lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down.
That's a really powerful message. It reminds me of that saying, be kind for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle.
And this ties into another point that Lorden emphasizes, which is the importance of building relationships, both within and outside of our organizations. She talks about seeking guidance from mentors and cultivating this network of support.
Networking can sometimes feel a little intimidating or even transactional, but Lordan offers a different perspective. She suggests focusing on building those authentic connections with people who share your interests or your career aspirations. It's not about collecting business cards. It's about finding those kindred spirits who can offer encouragement, advice, maybe even open doors to new opportunities.
Finding your tribe, those people who understand your journey and can offer that support and guidance. And it's not just about what others can do for you, it's about those mutually beneficial relationships where you're offering your support and expertise as well.
Absolutely. Creating a community of like-minded individuals who can learn from and support each other. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to touch upon one more concept that Lordan emphasizes throughout the entire book, and that's the importance of self-awareness.
Right. That's something we've been talking about a lot. She encourages us to regularly reflect on our strengths and weaknesses. And those limiting narratives that we talked about earlier, it's really about taking the time to understand ourselves better, both personally and professionally.
She provides this really powerful framework for understanding how our personal narratives, often formed in childhood or early career experiences, can really shape our self-perception and sometimes even limit our potential. It's about taking ownership of those stories and sometimes even rewriting them if they no longer serve us.
It's like she's giving us permission to shed those outdated beliefs and step into this new narrative that aligns with our aspirations and our values.
Exactly. And she provides some very practical tools for doing so, like identifying and challenging those limiting beliefs, focusing on the process rather than just the outcome, and intentionally engaging in those activities that reinforce a more positive and empowering self-image.
It's about recognizing that we're not defined by those old stories. We have the power to change our beliefs and our behaviors, and doing so, create those new possibilities for ourselves. And that's where continuous learning comes in again, right? Lorden emphasizes that we're all works in progress, and embracing that mindset of continuous growth is essential for navigating this ever-changing world.
Absolutely. And remember, learning doesn't have to be confined to a classroom or a formal educational setting. It can happen through online courses,
Mm.
mentorship, on-the-job experiences, and even through our hobbies and interests.
The key is to be really intentional and strategic with our learning, making sure it aligns with those long-term goals and helps us develop the skills and knowledge we need to thrive in our chosen field.
Exactly. Now, are you ready to explore some final insights and takeaways from Think Big? Before we wrap up,
Absolutely. I'm excited to hear what other gems of wisdom Lorden has in store for us. We've been talking a lot about these big picture ideas, about how our internal stories and the systems around us can really impact our careers. But Think Big isn't just all these heady concepts. Lorden also gets very practical in this book.
oh, absolutely. One thing that she really emphasizes is the importance of taking action. It's one thing to have all these insights and this knowledge, but it's only valuable if we actually apply it.
Right. It's like that saying, knowledge is power, but only if you use it. So how does Lauren suggest we actually bridge that gap between knowing something and then actually doing it?
Well, she encourages us to break down those big, daunting goals, those ME+ aspirations that we were talking about, into smaller, more manageable steps, and then commit to taking consistent action, even if it's just one small step each day.
So building momentum.
Exactly. And she really emphasizes that. Those small steps don't have to be these monumental leaps forward. They can be something as simple as spending 15 minutes researching a particular skill, or connecting with someone new on LinkedIn, or even just reading an industry publication that's related to your field.
It's those consistent efforts over time that ultimately lead to those significant results.
Absolutely. And along that journey, it's also important to remember that setbacks are just inevitable. And that's where the whole concept of resilience that we discussed earlier becomes so important. Lorden reminds us that challenges are simply part of the growth process. It's about developing those mental and emotional tools that allow us to bounce back from adversity stronger than before.
And I love how she doesn't really frame challenges as failures, but more as these opportunities for learning and growth.
Mhm.
It's a much more empowering way to look at things.
Absolutely. And, she provides those concrete techniques for building resilience,
Mm.
like remembering to give people second chances, intentionally reframing those negative experiences, and utilizing that timeout technique to regain perspective after a setback.
Yeah, speaking of that timeout technique, I've been trying to incorporate that into my own routine lately. And it's really amazing how just a few minutes of disconnecting and engaging in a calming activity can completely shift my mindset.
They can be so valuable. It's about giving yourself permission to take a break, process those feelings,
Cool.
and come back to the challenge with that renewed energy and clarity.
Like hitting the reset button on your brain.
Exactly. And Lorden really emphasizes that, building resilience is not about denying those difficult emotions or pretending that everything's fine, but it's about developing the skills to manage those emotions effectively and channel them in a positive direction.
And learning to view setbacks as not these personal defeats, but as opportunities to learn and grow from. Really embracing that growth mindset.
And speaking of embracing a more positive outlook, I just love how Lorden weaves this thread of kindness throughout the book. In a world that can feel so ruthlessly competitive sometimes, she really reminds us about the importance of compassion, both for ourselves and for others.
It's so refreshing. She encourages us to be supportive and understanding, recognizing that everyone's on their own unique journey, facing their own unique set of challenges.
Exactly. It's about creating a more collaborative and inclusive environment where we can all really thrive and reach our full potential. And that sense of community and support can be incredibly powerful, especially when you're navigating something as big as a career change.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Think Big, I keep coming back to that final message that Lorden leaves us with. She says, slow down, pay attention, and always be kind. And I feel like those three simple phrases really encapsulate the essence of her framework for career success.
They do. It's about being mindful and intentional with our actions, recognizing that, success is not this destination. It's a journey. And it's about approaching that journey with kindness toward ourselves and toward others.
I think Think Big is a book that really manages to be both practical and inspiring. It gives us this roadmap for achieving those ambitious career goals while also encouraging us to cultivate those qualities of kindness and resilience and social consciousness.
It's a book that will really stay with you long after you finish reading it, serving as this reminder that we all have the potential to achieve great things when we approach our careers with intention and purpose and a willingness to embrace the journey.
And if you are ready to embark on your own big thinking adventure, we highly recommend you check out Grace Lordan's Think Big. It might just be that spark you need to ignite those career aspirations and create a more fulfilling and meaningful work life. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.